When diving into anime, I like to draw a line between the story and the art, as good animation does not always come with good story and vice versa. I've always preferred the storytelling aspect of a show before its animation, and have therefore slowly but surely drawn myself to manga rather than anime over the years. If I know the story in the manga is great, there's a high chance that I too will enjoy the anime, especially nowadays when the average animation quality is through the roof. And I know not everyone in the anime community would agree. Sometimes you want some mindless but amazing action, and I'm all for that. But personally, I was almost drawn to the better story. One of my favorites is Dagashi Kashi. The author, Kotoyama, has always managed to put an interesting twist on what otherwise looks like a stereotypical romance, where it never really leads to anything. I want romance stories where it's clear that both sides are part of building their relationship. They both have their flaws, but at the same time, they grow past it together. It's the journey of the relationship, not the actual climax, that gets me going. It's a similar argument to how in action shows the journey is better than the ending, and I find romance to be no exception of this rule. When I saw that Kotoyama had for a little while worked on a new romance manga by the name of Yofukashi no Uta, or Call of the Night, I was instantly intrigued. It's an author who I knew for being good with romance, creating a new one with what I found to be a cool twist, a great setting, and some interesting characters. What I did not know at the time was that this manga was going to be Kotoyama's best to date, and one of my favorite stories of all time. This story ticked all my boxes, and then went out of its way to create even more that I didn't even know existed. It offers you romance, action, comedy, and anything in between. And after the anime got released, more and more people have gotten to experience this story too. So now is a better time than ever to take a deeper dive into Call of the Night. So what is Call of the Night about in the first place? In the first few chapters, we get to follow a young boy by the name of Yamori, who for the first time in his life is sneaking out. He had a tough time sleeping lately as he isn't enjoying his school life at the moment, and therefore decides to spend the night exploring the city. As he wanders the empty streets of night, admiring the beauty of it, he is approached by an older girl. She introduces herself as Nasuna and takes Yamori to explore more of the city's nightlife. When the girl later invites him over to her place, like the smart guy he is, he obviously says yes. After some convincing, he decides to fake fall asleep. Little did he know that Nasuna was a vampire all along, and in his fake sleep, she sucks his blood. Yamori, rightfully confused, confronts her when she admits to what happened, but instead of getting scared and going home, he is intrigued. During this outing, he has been happier and more free than ever before, and with that, he decides he too wants to become a vampire. But how exactly do you go about becoming a vampire? Well, you fall in love with one, of course. This is the premise of the show and the pillars that the rest is built upon, but more than often it's not the story itself that pulls people in, it's the setting and character. While this isn't a downplay on the story, it's more than often true that art, setting and characters are the thing pulling in readers. Thankfully, Call of the Night offers some of the most refreshing setting with some of the most amazing characters put into it. So what does the show do to stand out? 95% of the show takes place during the night, with the occasional flashback giving us sunlight. This leads to the show giving off a chill and relaxed vibe, and gets to use the colors of the night and the city to cast intricate shadows which make facial expressions stand out even more. This direction of fully embracing the night is the biggest strength the show has to pull in new readers, since it gives the show a form of personality. There is a reason the show is often described to be a vibe with amazing art, and it can all be traced back to the original setting for it. A genius move by Kotoyama, and it definitely paid off. It also paved the way for the amazing art in the anime, but let's save that for when we talk about it. But not just does the setting stand out, it also sets the tone for the rest of the show. The setting can often determine how you see the show. If there's dungeons, you can expect an adventure show, high school settings often paired with slice of life, and new worlds are often paired with isekais. The same way we can see this relaxed, cozy, and very beautiful nighttime setting open up a path for a more exciting take on a romance anime, with some edginess put into it. With this, I mean that the nighttime vibe is not just for the vampire trope's sake, it also helps build up the suspense and romance that the show offers. Yamori shouldn't be out at night, it has some danger to it, and that's what makes it fun, especially before we get a deep dive into the story when we are not sure who and what is good or evil. Building suspense and putting stakes on situation with just a setting alone is already amazing. Let's put it like this, I like showing the detective as an example of how a setting can create mystery around a character when they fit together. The shadows covering her along with the smoke of her cigarettes nearly illuminating in the darkness creates an uneasy feeling around it. And that's what a setting should do to a character. With setting and art like that, we can only hope that the story holds up too, so let's find out. Following the end of the anime, the story starts to show us more and more of its true colors. What I mean by this is, at least for me when I originally started reading the manga, thinking it was going to be a full-out romance show, but instead of a school setting we got this vampire trope. Well, what I learned was this was leading more towards an action drama than anything else, and I think it was the perfect direction for the show to go. There are one or two situations I specifically want to point out, as to me, this was a turning point from the stereotypical romance show with a cool setting, to this amazing adventure of Yamori and Asuna that we ended up with. So let's go through the manga and talk about what makes it so good, where the story took a turn, and how it is to read nowadays. We are a few chapters after the anime ended. For manga-only readers, that's around page 50. And our main duo is trying to figure out Nasuna's past to help her from being killed by the detective, like the vampire at school was. When searching for the few memories Nasuna has left, they end up at the hospital where they talk with the vampire responsible for taking care of Nasuna in her early days, Kabura. It turns out she was close friends with Nasuna's mother, and became her underling. Due to unknown circumstances, Nasuna's mother vanished, leaving behind a letter asking Kabura to take care of her daughter. With this, we learn that Nasuna never got turned. She was born a vampire, and it also puts a perspective with her relationship with Kabura. Now, this is important to us as Nasuna doesn't have any personal belongings she held dear when she got turned, because she never got turned in the first place. So she is technically without this grand weakness for the detective to use against her. This means they can focus on saving the other vampires before the detective gets to them, and so they go off. This leads to the detective becoming more desperate as she realizes she can never kill all vampires. And here it leads to the first real turning point of the show. On Halloween, we are in a big parade with many people dressed up, as well as our vampire friends. Suddenly, we see the detective shoot one of the vampires, then flees the scene. We know they don't die for it, and the crowd just thinks it's a show, but we are distressed as we know innocent people could have been killed by it. This leads to the only reasonable conclusion: the detective needs to be stopped. She shoots another and eventually ends up in a warehouse with Nasuna. Yamori, coming to help, gets aimed at by the detective, but he reveals that he knows her plan: to be killed by a vampire so the secret can come out to the world through her death. And now, with the plan ruined, she nearly pulls the trigger on herself, but is thankfully stopped in the last minute. This is where I first thought, this is kinda dark for a romance show. Well, it was at least what I thought at first. This was not a bad thing for the show to do. We'd had a few weird characters and creepy moments before, but never to this extent. And it led to some of the most thrilling action I've read in a long time, keeping me on the edge of the seat with every page, and this all came from what I thought to be a normal romance show. It got dark, a bit edgy, dramatic, and I loved this direction. And what I mean by this is really, well, in usual romance stories, it's quite stereotypical to what seems to be forced love. In most shows like this, you know who's gonna end up with who. So the effort built up between the characters comes down to staging as many cute moments as possible between them until they both realize they like each other. And this is sometimes done by having characters literally accidentally fall over each other, and it just doesn't seem realistic. So instead, we take the turn of exposing them to real danger, realizing they both want to protect each other with real stakes on the line, and this is a lot more real to me. Of course, nothing is real about trying to make a mass murder of vampires in a parade than putting a gun on yourself, but the concept of putting our main duo in danger, making them work to protect each other, and start to care for each other naturally instead of accidentally falling over and landing on each other, it's so much better. It's so fun to see both their friendship and love develop, not thanks to these happy accidents, but to adventures with real stakes, putting yourself on the line for the other and working through the unknown as a unit. To me, this is a much more beautiful depiction of romance. And this is kind of the main point I want people to realize when reading the story. It's easier to think that it has gone off the rails to become an action story, but to me, I realized the total opposite. Eventually, it got to me that now they kiss naturally, or closer than ever before, they protect each other, and I barely realized the transition due to how smooth and especially natural they came in the story. And few words can describe that realization, but I was looking at a fully fledged up couple, trusting each other more than ever before, comfortable and ready for what's next to come. There are still things that they are very unsure of, and a lot of characters are still standing in their way, but they are a lot less scared now than ever before, because this trust and bond formed by the dangers of their life and struggles is now the thing holding them together. Let's flip a page or two and talk about the current main villain of the manga, and I use the word villain very loosely here. I'm talking about Kiku, the vampire dating Yamori's friend Mahiro. When we first hear about her past of abandoning her offspring, leaving them to be when she's done with them, the reader as well as the characters in the show understand that this is a terrible situation for Mahiro, who is head over heels for her. But the more you get to know about Kiku, the more you start to realize her perspective on it. Let's put it like this. To our knowledge, vampires do not age, and they are in a way immortal. She has been alive for centuries as far as we know, just existing and getting by. It's fair to assume she has done most things she can do already. Travel, taking hobbies, learning, and especially being lonely. She can't be a part of the world ever, as she is not human. When she doesn't age like others around her, people will start asking questions, and even when she gets away with it, she sees all beings around her dying. Every connection, friendship, lifestyle with or around humans will disappear. It's a curse disguised as a blessing, and her only motivation in life is now to become human. Although this current arc is not finished yet, you can't help but to feel bad for her. We don't know under which circumstances she became a vampire, if she wants this life, how much she has lost, and how much she has suffered. It's depressing to see a character you want to hate for their actions to be this miserable, and they might not be to blame for it. Wouldn't anyone try anything to become human if they were in her situation? Kiko is an amazingly written character, and although she's terrible to others with her immense strength, she's also very vulnerable, and I can only hope the manga explores this side of her more, as I do not only think it would benefit her, but others would learn from it. I'm specifically talking about Yamori. I understand that the character can be determined, but this boy is 14 years old, barely flinches at the first time he is bitten by a vampire, and he willingly went home with one in the middle of the night. And now he has decided to become a vampire and barely questions what it is. And it was so satisfying to see him finally start to question what a vampire is at the end of the side story where they explore the school at night. And with everything that has happened around him, I think no other than Kiku can show and tell Yamori what it is to be a vampire, the struggles and losses that comes with immortality, and all the aspects of the situation that we don't know about. Just think about it, Nasuna was already, before she met Yamori, bored of her life, and she has not been a vampire for that long in perspective. Yamori needs a mentor, not another playmate to run around with at night. He is dealing with beings beyond superhuman power, getting attacked left and right, nearly forms sort of vampire hierarchy, but he barely knows himself. And with this arc we get a lot of answers, but I hope more is to come. As Yamori and Asuna are both newborns compared to the rest and have barely any idea of how the world works, exploring characters like Kiku, getting put in dangers, meeting vampires like Asami, and learning together with Nasuna is how they should be grown together. No accidental slips where they fall on each other, just pure emotions, thrill, and love. And I dare say I'm so amazed at how the author has handled it so far. Villains like Kiku give purpose to Nasuna and Yamori's feelings. Kiku is not a good villain because she does bad things. She is a good villain because she teaches the main character something. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been waiting for it, I have been waiting for it. Welcome to the stage, Anko. Welcome, Anko. Tell us a little about yourself, will you? Yes, I'm a well-known vampire hunter, and I became one after my dad cheated on my mom with one, and then became a vampire himself and killed my whole family. Oh, doesn't that sound exciting? Let's go ahead and take a deeper look at your life, shall we? I already talked a little bit about Anko when explaining her Halloween story before, but she's more than just pure vampire hatred. So let's dive into her story a little bit more and her place in the whole thing. We learn her backstory after the chapters in the Halloween story takes place. She went to the same night school as Nosuna about 10 years earlier from where we currently are in the story, going by her real name Meijiro Koyoko. She was Nasuna's first ever friend, hinting at a near romantic relationship at times. She would often teach Nasuna about books and manners. Later Anko revealed that she knew her father was having an affair, and together with Nasuna they went to find out more. Anko broke down over the situation, and when Nasuna revealed herself to be a vampire, she begged her to help her out. After trying but failing to make her a servant, Anko's father turned into a vampire, killing her whole family in the process. After this, Anko broke all contact with Nasuna, and they would barely hear from each other until the incident 10 years later. We learn later that the vampire responsible for turning her father was no other than Kiku, and with that Anko puts the whole blame of the situation on her. To some extent she has the right to do so. It is hinted that vampire has a sort of increased charm or ability to affect humans, so technically it could be that Anko's father biologically couldn't resist being charmed, but we are not sure, so it's a lot of what ifs. I won't go into a whole rant about their relationship to each other, but I want to use the situation to try to rationalize Anko's thinking and behavior. Because this is a trope the story rolls with a lot. And that's the lack of, in other words, something is missing. Nearly all characters have it. Nasuna is missing excitement in her life. Yamori is missing a place he fits in. Kiku is missing meaning with her life as an immortal being. And Anko is missing a family. She no longer wishes to kill Kiku, because she has found her long lost family in Asuna and Yamori. Her arc to me, which is at the endgame now, is the best one in the entire show. A character we have been with since the near beginning of the story, whom we've always been kind of scared of, suspicious to some extent. And throughout the story, all major events has been with her at the center somehow. She is what brought Nasuna and Yomori closer than ever before. She is so important to every single part of the story, with some connections to every single character, and she's doing a damn amazing job in the front lines. I'm trying not to go into too much detail about her arc, as to me this is the best written character in this entire show, and I want people to experience that for themselves. But her finally finding her place and the long-lasting family that she has been wanting for so long is the most satisfying panel in the manga so far. And I cannot tell you how heartwarming it is to see a character who's been suicidal for the most of the show finally realizing they have a place in this world, they have people who care about them, they have a family. It just makes you happy. I won't go into every single character, as I would have to sit here for literal hours just talking, but these are my two favorite ones, and I believe they solo carry the story so far in the manga. Now these two aren't the main characters of the story, but I don't mind side characters carrying the plot at all. I would go as far to say it's a good thing, because when everything isn't controlled by the main characters, there's more stakes involved. The less they can control, the more factors they can't prepare for will show up. And I think that's great for development. Kiku and Anko being as good as they are is what makes Nasuna and Yamori's relationship so natural and strong. Let's finally talk about the anime adaptation. I would go on a long prologue here, what an adaptation should do, etc, etc, but just look at it. If this is not the perfect capture of the show's setting and vibe that I praised so heavily early on in this video, I don't know what could be. The word I want to use to describe the art is immersive. Everywhere you see this show, people praise it for the vibe it gives off, the cool and calm setting of nighttime, and the beauty and danger that comes along with it. Liden Films, the studio who stood for the animation and art, really showed how far they can take it. I can't even begin to imagine sitting there with these manga panels trying to capture a certain vibe, and then not just achieving it, but exceeding expectations. I'd love to sit and talk about color theory here, but I'm as colorblind as it gets, but even I can appreciate the amount of work that went into the art. Not just with a night sky or two, but the shadows, the colors, and the story a city creates during peak night hours. Being able to capture that with art, that's impressive. Okay, but I actually do want to go in a long prologue on what an adaptation should do, etc, etc, which renders this whole intro segment a lie, but here we go. Adapting a manga into anime is often a question about how much of the original source material you include or change when turning it into an anime. Sometimes changes can be for the better, as some things just don't fit or make sense over video as they do in text, and sometimes it can be for the worst, as it's barely recognizable from the original story. So although it did an amazing job with the art for Call of the Night, how well did they adapt the story? I call the show very faithful for the original manga. I would be nitpicking if I sat here and tried to find small differences between them. There are some, but in general it barely skips any content at all. I find this a good thing, as in this case I'm a big fan of the manga, so the closer the story is to the manga, the better it is in my eyes. I was a huge fan of how they included the detective. Her aura and vibes stood out so much during the anime, which looks fairly cutesy and innocent until she arrives. Just the suspense you get from every scene she's in is absolutely phenomenal, and I really wish I had more to say about the plot here, but I'm very happy that it struck so close to the manga and it was a job well done. But there is one thing we can dive deeper into, and that is the visual storytelling, and it's also the reason a lot of people find this show to be a vibe. I'm mostly referring to the shots of the city, streets, and people outside of dialogue. This adds a lot to the watcher as we get to experience their walk ourselves. I think this is a factor which is very important, as with just scenes of them walking and talking, all we see is their point of view, and not realizing the full feeling of city at nighttime. Watching these faraway shots, you can also feel the wind and calmness of the scene, and that to me is everything. There is no way I could talk about the anime without mentioning Creepy Nuts, the group that made the opening and ending for the anime. To give you a perspective of how important these songs were, the show got its name from one of them, Yofakashi no Uta, and they even got a cameo in the anime, which to me is such a cool thing to do. These songs are so fitting to the anime that it would be a crime to use them anywhere else. Creepy Nuts did such a great job with them, and it's so nice to see them getting the recognition for it. As soon as you hear the intro to the song, you instantly know it's from Call of the Night, and having that in memory is such a cool thing for a song to do. It's kinda like the rumbling to Attack on Titan. The song and the anime is made for each other. Let's tackle the big question first before diving into the manga. Will there be a season 2? Considering the huge success of season 1 and the fact that there's more than enough source material for it, we can quite comfortably assume that there will be a season 2 in the future. As of writing this video, no announcement has been made so far, but I wouldn't be too worried as it's still quite early after season 1's release date. I'm more worried about the when rather than an if. For the manga, the current arc featuring Kiku, Mahiro, and the detective is at its climax, and we can expect this arc to end fairly soon. Does this mean the end of the manga? I don't think so at all. There is still so many unsolved things in the show, so many unexplored passages, and not to mention, Yamori is technically still not a vampire. My guess is that there will be a new arc starting, featuring new adventures with some sort of new character. I really hope it's a power fantasy, as the fights we've gone so far are absolutely amazing to follow, and the somewhat hierarchy that is forming could be an interesting route to explore. We still have barely any idea of what vampires are, how they work, and vampires outside of the ones in our group. And if the manga should try to explore any of these routes, I think trying to figure out what vampires are and how they work is the next one to go. Yamori needs answers, and so does the rest of them. And with that, this concludes my video on Call of the Night, my new second favorite series of all time. I'm so happy I got to experience this story, and I hope you feel inspired to read it too. I also want to give a special thank you to the people over on r/Yofakashi no Uta for their help with the panels, questions, and content for this video. I wouldn't have gotten nearly enough information without this community. Also, a little shout out to Bino on Twitter for making the thumbnail for this video. And of course, thank you for watching. This was somewhat a longer video than usual, so let me know if you like this and I will keep it up. And I would be very grateful if you would like the video for it. Want to watch more of my content? Consider subscribing and joining my Discord server for more updates, talks, and content. I hope to see you on my next video. That's all from me. Have a good one, y'all.